In this video, we'll continue to remove some remaining elements of the pen markings on the old photo using the clone stamp tool. Let's go ahead and zoom into this area right here, focusing on this wall here. And as we've already mentioned, we've got some very specific kind of finite little areas that are going to be very difficult to heal, to repair using the healing brush, and especially the spot healing brush, as we saw based off of the sample, the selection that you'll paint using the spot healing brush. As it samples from around that selection, it can get kind of muddy if you've got a lot of different tonal changes happening here, a lot of variation with your darks and lights. Okay, so I've got another layer here that I've created, and I've titled it Wall Elements. Essentially, you could do all of your healing on one layer if you want to. It's totally fine. I'm raking up these layers for a couple of reasons. One, it'll just be easy to toggle the visibility of these different layers and just kind of see the different areas we've focused on. And then it's also just a good workflow, especially if you want to completely revisit another area and you just want to completely start over. You can just delete that layer and not worry about deleting a lot of areas that you healed that you were actually happy with. Okay, so what we're going to do, working on this layer, I'm going to come over to the toolbar and we're going to choose our clone stamp. So the clone stamp basically works differently from the healing brush and spot healing brush in that it's basically creating an exact copy of the pixels that you're sampling from. It's not considering any of the texture or the lighting or the transparency of the shadows. So you just hold down Alt and you can sample and you can begin to paint. Now notice nothing's happening. That is because we need to come up here to the options bar and where it says sample, set current layer to all layers. Now we can sample from all the layers here in our project. So hold down Alt once again and we're going to sample and begin to paint. So you're going to do a lot more sampling and you're going to have to be a lot more mindful of the areas you sample from so that the information you're basically painting in here feels like it fits, feels like it's consistent. Now, as I do this, you can see I'm actually using a hard round brush and we're getting some hard edges here. We might want to right click, try a soft round brush if we want. And again, I'll kind of sample again. And that might give us a little bit better visual result there. And periodically, I highly recommend zooming out and just kind of toggling the visibility of the layer that you're working on and just kind of make that comparison of what you've been repairing. I can hit the left bracket key here. Just take down my cursor to be just a little bit smaller. So basically with the clone stamp tool, as you just saw, we have access to the brush preset picker, unlike with the spot healing and healing brush tool. You can use any type of brush preset, even a custom one that you might have made, which is really, really handy. Another thing you can do is you can come over here into the brush panel. We might want to turn on transfer and have pen pressure enabled for both opacity and flow controls. That way, instead of just basically placing a completely opaque copy of those pixels that I'm sampling from, I can build them up over time if I want, just to have a little bit more control if I think I need to. So with the clone stamp tool, you actually have just a lot of power. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with the clone stamp tool that we won't get into in this course. If you want kind of a more in-depth review of the clone stamp tool, check out a course in our library. I believe it's called The Power of Healing in Photoshop. It's a course I did a while back, and we cover all the different healing tools and features in Photoshop that I think you'll find really useful. But for this particular project, this really serves our purposes nicely. Another thing that you might want to turn off when you're kind of working in this very specific area is this aligned option. Again, very same situation when we were talking about using the other healing tools, spot healing and healing. Basically, it's that aligned option is going to make sure that the healing cursor always remains the same distance from where you're painting. Okay, so if I sample from up here and I'm painting right here, see where that cursor is? And if I move over here, you can see that cursor is the same distance. We'll take a couple steps back. But if I turn that off, that's not the case. If I sample here And I'm painting right there, and then I move over here. That sample area is still in the same spot. So something to consider. You might find it very helpful working in just a very small area like this, and it might reduce the probability of picking up information that you just didn't want pulled in. Okay, so this part is where, again, you're going to be doing a lot of sampling, holding down Alt. You're working in some very specific kind of finite areas. You want to be very mindful of where you're sampling from. So my challenge to you in between videos is just to continue on kind of moving around this area, really removing the last little remnants of the pen markings here. But we could move on over here where we have some objects that looks like they're stacked up here. Look like maybe some sort of cartons of something kind of stacked up. So just kind of healing these edges here, and even on the objects themselves, I can see just some remaining aspects of those pen markings. Okay, so just moving around. Again, there was some pen marking over here as well on this gentleman wearing the apron. So we can continue to kind of repair a lot of this information as well. And again, we're sampling from an area where we have a darker tone as opposed to right here. So you want to, again, be very mindful of where you're sampling from. And honestly, right here, I probably really don't need to use the clone stamp tool. I could probably use the spot healing brush or the healing brush. Things like this arm, though, I might still use the clone stamp. And having my brush preset set to transfer might allow me to kind of build that up over time. Now, one thing I think I'll do just in between videos, I'll actually take all of this this information just kind of right here in this general area that I've been healing, and I'm just took my lasso tool there and just made a selection. I'm going to right click, and I'm just going to do a layer via cut. Again, I like to kind of separate these different areas that I'm working on in different layers. So I'll call this one like background elements or something like that. And I'd really just kind of want to have the wall area reserved just to this wall elements layer. Again, just kind of a workflow that I prefer to use in staying organized. In our next video, we'll focus on this new layer, which I'll title in between videos, and we'll just kind of move around the background area of the image, removing a lot of random spots and blemishes and little scrapes and fibers that might have gotten stuck to the photo. And then beyond that, we'll have another video where we focus on this foreground area, most notably around the kind of the bar stool section, where we'll clean up those blemishes and scratches right there as well. And we'll keep that on a separate layer too. So stay tuned for those videos as we continue on the process of really removing a lot of these blemishes from this old photo.